Good morning, good evening, good night, everyone, wherever you're joining us from. I'm really excited about recording this episode. I've got my good friend, Mr. Durr, with us, and Ryan Brook. Today's topic is going to be talking to these two authors. I now get to say that maybe for the first time, these two published authors, maybe someday best-selling, about the book Solving for Value. So that's what I want to get into. I have a million questions. We're not going to start with introductions. Everybody knows you, Sunder. They know me. They've heard from me too much. They're going to get to meet Ryan today. And so tell us about the book. Question to both of you. What's the point of the book? Like, how did it come to be? Tell us a little bit of background.
Well, we had too much time on our hands, Jim, I think is the honest answer. No, I think Sander and I have always wanted to try and do something together. And I think we were a little bit fed up with how the market maybe tried to portray that everything was perfect in consultancy and in work. And I think particularly for me, I just kind of wanted to speak a bit of truth to power. And we kind of started riffing off some ideas. And I guess, as they say, we ended up with a book.
All of a sudden happened. Yeah, it took us a good 2.5 years. Like, this was the incremental approach as well, but more on that later. I think that's the whole interesting part of it, right? The reason behind is that we got frustrated with the way that we see these agile coaches, if you will, or the way that organizations adopt Scrum or any kind of agile framework, and they're doing it consistently wrong and shooting themselves in the foot. Yet they wonder where the shot came from. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why we wanted to provide the empathy to the readers as well. You're not in this alone. We know it can be a very sucky situation, but this is what we've done to get ourselves out of the mud.
Yeah. I'm an avid reader, as both of you know. I'm sitting in front of a wall of books. If somebody were to pick up your book, or maybe they get it for Christmas or the holiday season, and they can only take away one thing to make their work life better, what do you hope that it is?
Oh, if it was me, I'd just say simply that you're not alone. That there are plenty of us who go out every day, fight the good fight, and as Sanders already used the word empathy, that's kind of what we want people to take away from this, that you might be having those situations in your organization, but a lot of us have been through them before. And so you are not alone. We are there with you in spirit, because you haven't bought us to be there physically.
Which is much more expensive than the book, I bet.
Oh, it is a little bit, but I think we joke at some point in the book, right? You know, there's good advice, and then there's consultancy. Something we're always taught is don't do that drive-by consultancy, and arguably that is what we've done a little bit in the book, but we've tried to do it through allegory and stories so that people can kind of overlay their own personal douchebag of Roy, one of our main characters, in the book. So what we want you to try and do is take our book, take your context, and try and do a bit of a mind merge on them and see what's useful.
Exactly. For me, it would be that I would like people to maintain a critical mindset and don't take things for granted. Because it's really easy to just end up in the day-to-day business, right? And forget, like, this is the value that we're trying to deliver. And this is the way we've always done business, and the other stupid stigmas that we want people to avoid. But somewhere along the lines, we've lost our critical thinking. Right now, I want people to keep asking why we're doing this. Why is this in our backlog? Why are we doing it like this? Why is the process like this? Why can't we do it differently? Why is management micromanaging and not leading? Keep asking why. Keep asking those critical questions. Be the final frontier, if you will, of the agile adoption. I don't want to say transformation, because frequent listeners of the podcast know I hate the word transformation, because it's not a transformation. Yeah. But again, keep that critical mindset. Keep asking questions, and don't take things for granted just for the hell of it.
Yeah, I really want to come back to this idea of critical thinking. Something else that Ryan's comment makes me wonder is, did you struggle to find a tone of the book? Or maybe how would you describe the tone? Because Sunder and I, we swear like sailors when we're just hanging out. Ryan, I know you less well, but I suspect from your comments already that you two have a similar tone. That's why this guy and I gravitated towards each other, is we see a lot of things similar and all that. But if you were talking to a potential reader or buyer of the book, What's that tone? Because you mentioned empathy, but I also hear a lot of pragmatism.
What's the tone, Sander? I don't know. Well, you describe it as a bar book. I mean, for me, it wasn't necessarily about finding a tone, because I don't think we particularly have a particularly professional bone in our body, or I certainly don't go into these consulting engagements in full suit, full tie. That's just not me. And also, I think that the market has moved on a lot from that kind of corporate culture to kind of just honest pragmatism. That's the word you use, Jim, and I totally agree with you. So finding a tone in this book was just, well, who are we? I've always tried to advocate for doing that and bringing your authentic self to work. It is tiring to do 7.5 hours every day, every week, every month, every year, trying to be something that you're not. So this book is very much like, when you're reading it, I mean, it's easy to say this as the author, but when I read sections, I can tell which bits you wrote and which bits I wrote.
Oh, yeah.
Because there is an element of still we have different tone, but we've blended it together quite nicely. And even our proofreader said she couldn't tell the difference.
Exactly.
So yeah, the tone is, well, we initially called it the unprofessional Scrum book, didn't we? But I almost think we're doing ourselves a disservice by saying that. The tone is trying to be humorous, but also trying to ensure we have that undertone of we are actually trying to tell you something quite useful here.
That's what we aim for, at least. And I think, to me, what I really like about the way that we delivered this book, it's very much true to ourselves. Like, it's not going to be different from when you sit next to us, when you take a class, when you're here listening to the podcast. The tone of the book is exactly the same. We are, we created a conference talk around this called The 10 Lies Organizations Tell, right? And as part of that is the introduction is that organizations live and people live in the Instagram world, pretend that they're someone else that they're actually not. And you see that on LinkedIn as well quite a bit. If we would now apply a very managerial, very serious tone to this book, we would not doing ourselves a proper service. We would pretend again that we're someone else that we're not. So that, coming back to your question, Jim, the tone of the book is the tone that we actually have.
Yeah. When we use the word empathy, I believe that you show empathy also by modeling and sharing behaviors. And if we were trying to tell you something, not being our true selves, why should you listen to us, frankly? So we want to basically be like, this is how we do our work. This is who we are. This is the fights we've had, the same fights as you. So maybe let's share something together and hopefully achieve some great things.
I like your answer earlier, Ryan, of you're not alone. And now I'm hearing the themes of authenticity and pragmatism and just being your authentic self. Do you worry at all as authors who are putting out a very one-directional medium, right? Like days like today that I know you're about to have in this conversation are probably the most two-way interaction you're going to get as an author. Mm-hmm. Are you worried at all about how your words might be received? Because you don't get to have a dialogue. It's very one-directional. That's what I've always found as a reader. Is that something you both have thought about or talked about?
I think that comes back to maintaining the critical mindset. Ultimately, I'm not too afraid how people are going to use my words, because again, that's really up to them. This is a viewpoint from our experience, the dysfunctions and the anti-patterns that we have seen. And we're not saying that people should apply this at all, right? This is just a toolkit that people can leverage. You don't have to do anything with this. This is the same thing that we say in class, that we say in consultancy. This is my opinion. This is my viewpoint. You don't have to do anything with that. However you want to do that, if you're going to do it, that's up to you. This is what we have done. But again, keep that critical mindset. And that's this is kind of a cloaked answer to the words, it depends. Your favorite phrase, Jim.
As that comedian Jimmy Carr once said, right, I've already told the joke that will end my career. If you want to take my words out of context, you can take my words out of context. But the fact is, I know that we wrote this book with a positive and a good intent. It was never about revenue. It was just about doing something. I think you used the phrase really early on. It was about leaving a legacy. I think with your children. I think that's something you spoke about. And it might sound really meta, but I quite like that idea. There will always be an ISBN with our name against it. I mean, whether you like it or not, you can't take that away from us.
Exactly. This is one of those career achievements that we wanted to have. And we did it in a way that we found was useful, that was fun to do as well. Mm-hmm. We did self-publication, so we didn't use any publisher, which gave us the creative freedom as well, which made it a lot more interesting to us. But this way we learned a lot in how this process works, but also what we should do, how we should do it, what we should not do, because the feedback, the incremental feedback that we got through the Mastering Agility Discord community was super important and very helpful, especially in the beginning when we were, trying to find our tone or the way that we're going to write this book. Keeping on the legacy thing, we put that in there as well. Like we want to have some footprint that's still here when we pass away. And then I think it was James Farley, shout out to James, who mentioned like this, compared to the rest of the tone, this feels pretty damn heavy. So maybe you want to take that out. And I think these kind of things are so useful to get.
I echo exactly what he just said. That's a cheat answer, isn't it?
Well, no, I mean, if you agree, it's the same thing as doing peer review and then speaking twice during your daily scrum, right? You don't have to echo the same thing if someone has already said it.
Absolutely.
Do the two of you think that people like us who love what we do, at least for me, I think I speak for all of us, we likely wouldn't keep doing this if we didn't. Do we care about work too much? Like having heavy topics and basing identity on things like, I gotta, and I'll tell you where my question's coming from. It's coming from a comment I got in a team meeting last week where somebody said everyone else needs to realize that this company, this product we're all building isn't even remotely the most important thing in my life. It just kind of struck me. It stuck with me. And I'm just curious, is that, to sum it up, do some of us worry way too much about work?
I think yes, and I also think that too few people think about what makes work valuable to them. Because this answer that you just gave me makes me think this person doesn't really think about what makes him happy, what makes him drive and thrive in his career. And it almost feels like he's just going through the motion for the hell of it because they need to pay their bills, which makes sense, of course. But, if you're going to have to do that for the rest of your career until you're, 69, 70, it's going to be a long-ass career, dude.
I think it's okay for people to care about work to differing degrees. Like you just said, Sander, it offers you, sometimes it's income to pay your mortgage and keep your family and life good. Sometimes it's an opportunity to grow. Sometimes it's an opportunity to actually just show that you're really good at something. We all need different things at different times. So particularly in our world of agility and Scrum and things like that, I think the reason why it particularly blurs the line for me is that we deal with human emotions and that kind of strategic thinking about humanity, really. We're thinking about how people at their core want to be treated, how they want to engage, and that is no different than a relationship outside of work versus in work. The only difference is the context and the constructs we work within. So I think our boundary is perhaps less well defined because it's not very transactional. If you have a very transactional, let's take a simple example, working in McDonald's, right? I can't imagine you care a huge amount about working in that job because when you clock off, that's it, that's over. Whereas for us, I don't think that boundary exists so well.
What's the difference then? Like, how do you compare McDonald's to this type of job?
Well, I think our work is very much in the complex domain, as we that's something we will always talk about. The relationship between requirements and I always say people are great, but people are assholes. And they make things so much more challenging than they need to be. But I don't necessarily think they do that on purpose. That is, everyone will have a different character, a different behavior set, a different skill set. And our job is to try and help all those people work together towards a common goal. And that is not easy.
Equally, I can imagine that working at McDonald's is not easy either, because I can imagine people being assholes. Like, it's an ungrateful job.
Well, customers particularly, and I guess even so, your colleagues. But I think what I'm trying to say is the level of. I think we focus very much on team interworking and how we can cause the removal of those impediments, how we can work with senior management to unblock them. I think there are definitely overlaps, but I think ours is much more strategic rather than, hey, I'm just going to rock up for a day, help a team run a sprint planning event, and I'm going to leave. I don't know about you or Jim, but I've never had a day like that. There's always more to it than just those transactional events.
I think what I was just telling you in the car when I picked you up from the airport was the exact perfect example to this. Like, when I woke up in the middle of the night, my brain is still racing with these ideas that I can apply or something that we can create, because there's always something more. It's not some job that I can just clock out at 5, dump my shit, and then do the same thing over again tomorrow. Like there's always creative ideas that are racing in my mind.
Does that ever get too much for you though?
So far, not yet. Sometimes I do have to focus on what stuff am I going to do, what can I park, and at the same time, I constantly experience FOMO. Like there's always something that if I don't pick up on this now, then what?
Yeah.
And I think it has gotten to you in the past. I mean, you've spoken openly on here about burnout, right? So it's maintaining that balance has been a struggle. Something you and I have talked about before. And Ryan, something I think Sunder has heard me say on the podcast, but you might not have, is there's a few days in my life that stand out, like, I don't know, 10 or 12. And I'm 47 today. And one thing my grandfather said is always have a job, but never stop looking for your career. And I remember even as like a 16-year-old saying, what do you mean? What's the difference? And he gave me some good answers. And I think there are days, to your question, Ryan, where it is transactional for me. The risk becomes when too many of those days get strung together. There are certain days where I have a list. I need to come in, log in, do that list, and log off, because work can't be the most important thing for me that day. But it's so hard for me because I care, right? One of the best compliments I've ever gotten is, you care, Jim. Why do you care? Why do you care when other people don't, or other consultants don't, or whatever? I can't turn that off. Sometimes I really wish I could. And I think that's a part of solving for value. Is I would imagine that if a product owner or a leader doesn't care, a lot of things are going to get hard.
Yeah, I think that's why, and we've used the word so many times already, we use the word empathy rather than sympathy, because we've been there, right? We can literally say a lot of these situations that people speak about, I've been in something similar, right? All three of us are trainers. We've all been in a class where someone's raised a story, and it's very rare where we go, I've never heard of something like that happening before. Everyone thinks they're special, right? And we talk about this in our conference talk quite a bit, but you all think you're special, but actually you're typically not, right? Yes, you have your own context, but the problems and the lies that you tell yourselves are very common. So what we really want to do is frankly say, bullshit, right? You're not special. So hey, maybe we just talk about common solutions, talk about common problems, and let's see where we can go from there. And that is where the book really came from, just us moaning and bitching a lot.
Exactly. There's so many anti-patterns and dysfunctions, again, that are still being applied. While it's almost common sense that you shouldn't do those, still they persist. And I think I'm going to pull up my phone now because I just got a message from a reader that, she sent. I'm not going to state her name because she might get in trouble for that. If you're listening, you know who you are. But she sent us a picture of the page he was reading, and it was on a bit that Ryan wrote on leadership, and having reflection toward leadership and make them think about what if they're not doing this, how could they do it differently, etc., etc. And she replied, like, this is 100% exactly what I'm experiencing right now. Cannot publish it in a post on LinkedIn, so I'll send it here. And she said it helped me realize that leadership will not be on the same page with me, and it will be very difficult in implementing any change. I will see how it goes coming months. Otherwise, I'm going to look for more same like-minded people. So it's, I think, to that degree, in the empathy and making people realize that they're not alone, I think we already succeeded in quite a few of these kind of instances. And to me, we were having a little discussion on what does success mean to us in the terms of this book. And I think these nuggets, these little pieces of feedback, are the essential pieces of success to me. Mm-hmm. Like, we can create the familiarity, but also make people feel that they're not alone in this. People have been dealing with this, and here's a toolkit, like what we've done with this, how we went out of this, if we have, because sometimes it's just, it's a shit place, and we'll just stay shit for a little bit, and that's okay. It's part of life.
When you all feel, whether it's at work or in your personal life, that you're not special, that you're going through something thousands or millions of other people have went through, or you're dealing with something like your reader just said, how does it make you feel? Does it make you feel better, worse, or something else?
For me personally, it makes me feel better because it kind of gives me that realization that I've not caused this. So it lets me off the hook mentally first, right? That, well, maybe I did cause it, but I've worked in lots of companies. But firstly, I think it lets me feel like I'm off the hook because, right, I get burnt out all the time. I really struggle to kind of create that barrier in my life. And we've spoken about it before. I use therapy a lot. I go for long walks. I kind of create myself that space. But one thing I need to know when I leave work and when that kind of, and I feel it, I feel it's a really weird warm feeling, right? Well, this is almost like therapy for me. I get like a warm, hot flush from my toes to my head, and I know something is getting on top of me. And the first thing that I need to do is acknowledge it. I need to just, something Stephanie Ockerman says all the time, I need to give it a name, right? And if I give it a name, if I call it out, it suddenly makes it feel more tangible, more real, and that's something that I can handle. Do you feel the same when you with your work?
No, because my brain is just, it's a dirt road and doesn't really do too much. I don't get this specific feeling, but I'll get a little bit agitated after a little while where I'm like, I should take a couple of days off right now. And I think that's a little bit the luxury that I can have in the position that I have, because both of you guys, you have your own company. I don't have my company to run, right? So if I have done my job, I've done my trainings, I'm on my targets as where I want them to be, I can sit back a little bit and take like a day off, basically, without having to worry about this is going to cost me anything. What does the client think about this, and so on and so on. I don't have that pressure in that sense. So I think it's a little bit more of a luxurious position. Also, like the burnout that Jim was just referring to, that made me help me ask myself the questions that I need to ask myself, in the sense like, what is happening here? Do I need to do anything with this? Is this job still fulfilling? Because the root cause of my burnout back then was just because I never thought about what makes me happy, what does drive me. And all this stuff, like either this podcast or writing the book or creating discovery cards that we're doing now, training, it makes me feel that I am on a holiday. Everything that I'm doing is so much fun. It consistently feeds me energy. And I think the only downside of that is even my energy bucket can overflow. There's just too much in there.
Yeah.
Will either of you worry about measuring the ROI of writing this book, or how to balance that fun that you're describing and all the things around writing the book and things that come next with, okay, yeah, but what's the point? Or is that already done in your brain, and at this point you're not worried about it and you're just enjoying the ride?
I'll go for the latter.
Just enjoying the ride?
I think I'm done in the sense that I've achieved what I wanted to achieve with the success points, but also the fact that the book's there and that kind of the legacy thing has been written off. We're not, speaking of ROI, I think there's an important note to make there, that return on investment doesn't necessarily have to be monetary, right? I don't give a shit about the money. Sure, it's nice because I'm going to invest it back into the podcast and create more content and do cool shit.
I'm not.
I know. That's because your wife is spending it on Starbucks. That's a whole different story.
Or Taylor Swift merch.
or other nerdy stuff. But, having written this book already gives me so many ideas for spin-offs, for other ideas that kind of tie into this. So you create a whole universe of things. So this is done and dusted pretty much tonight with the book launch. That's going to be like the cherry on top of the cake. How do you say that? I think
yeah,
right. This Dutch version, anyway. And that, to me, that's almost like closure of this process. Like, it's there, it's done, it's dusted, and good.
For me, I feel right. It really annoys me when people use the phrase imposter syndrome, and basically, it's a way of giving themselves some self-ego boost. For me, what I wanted to prove was that I had something to say that was different. And in this case, I think different tone made a bit of difference. I don't think when you read the book, the content or the ideas are hugely innovative. I think we have some new stuff in there, the story mining template, the way we approach some stuff. But I think the main difference of our book is the way we explain it in a more humanistic and a more accessible way. So has the ROI been met? 100%. It's given me proof that I had something to say and that people wanted to listen. But also, we treated this first book, and importantly, I'm calling it a first book, as an experiment. We didn't know how to do this. We thought, hey, put some words in a Word document, right? I've got 10, 20,000. The numbers were ticking up. That's a book. Oh my God, it's not a book, right? But actually, the book we've just started writing, and we're, 10,000 words in? Actually, not even that. I think this one will be a lot more tactical, a lot more purposeful. ROI will be more specifically defined, but it will never be about revenue for either of us. No. And if it did, I think we'd both lose interest really quickly.
Yeah. Also, writing definitely does not make you rich.
Nope.
Unless you're like Stephen King or something.
I'm genuinely in my head trying to think the amount of hours we spent versus the revenue we've made so far.
Oh, it's going to be shit.
Working at cents per hour.
Oh yeah, it's going to be shit. Yeah. No, but marketing or books are more like a marketing tool in that sense, right? Because it's going to be linked to your name. And now, when people read this, I hope that they're like, these people, they know their stuff. They know what they're talking about. They know what we're going through as an organization, and they might be able to help. Yeah. So let's assume, just for the hell of for the hell of it, and the sake of argument, that maybe one consultancy gig gets out of this. You've already tripled, maybe quadrupled your ROI on this book.
I totally agree.
Done.
Don't need a lot.
No, exactly. And I think that's the thing. Coming back to the linked influencers, a lot of people are in this, for the shine, and this has never been about the shine for us.
And I think something that I guess you can empathize with perhaps more than Sander, Jim, is as independent business owners, that whole phrase of, I do lots of marketing, 50% of it is working. The problem is I don't know which 50%. So actually part of this for me is just saying, hey, I'm going to put something out to market. What's coming back? And it might be that they've seen a book that gets reinforced by a LinkedIn post. It might be they've joined up to our newsletter. They might have met me at a conference. Something works, but in our career, we are judged on our personality. And frankly, I don't want to be remembered as another guy in a suit, like a McKinsey style consultant, right? That's not how I want to be remembered. I want to be remembered that, hey, that was a guy who had a glass of rosé in his hand and he was not a douchebag to talk to. That's good enough for me.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I was talking to Jeff Guthelf, this idea was hammered home, right? He was talking about the speed of the marketing, right? Sometimes he walks off the stage, somebody's waiting for him and says, I want to hire you. Other times it's taken years. And I think I envy Sander for a lot of times, right? To be able to not have to worry about certain things. But I don't know about you, Ryan, but I love it. It's the time of year that I think a lot of people are reflective. It's only about a month from now I'll start having to look at things like taxes and all that. And I'm sure I'm going to see a lot of that money go out. And then I'm going to think about all the time that went out. And I think it's very normal for many people, business owners especially, but even others, to say, wow, where's my money and time going? It's not going where I want it to. However, the flip side of that is I have so many examples where somebody has came to me and brought me a story or business or a job or something about something that I did just through the normal course of life and being me. And you can't measure it. Like you can't measure those things in the moment. You can measure them at the macro level. I am a big believer that everything can be managed, but it's not easy to manage or to measure all of those type of things.
I agree. As an owner, there's kind of three things that stand out to me as a business owner. The first of which is I hate replying to emails in the evening, right? If I'm sitting there watching a Netflix episode or something like that, but a client email comes in, there is a part of me that wants to reply. And I don't, as an owner, I don't have a very good boundary between Ryan as a family person and Ryan as a business owner and Ryan as a job, because actually all of those three things merge. So the emails in the evening, tax season is also awful. But also Christmas. And that's just not because of what Jim said, Christmas being a reflective season. I love it because nearly every part of the world that I do business in is also off. So there's no emails. Whereas if I take 2 weeks in the middle of July, I know I'm going to be getting emails at that time of year. And therefore, even though I'm on holiday, there is still that incentive for me to reply because they don't understand, right? So yes, I do envy what Sander has. But like you say, Jim, there are pros and cons of everything, right? And I'm happy with what I've got right now.
Well, absolutely. And I want to ask a lighter question, but before I'll just say it's funny that the reason we're talking today is because just like you, it's hard for me to take a vacation in the middle of the year. And, today is probably my last day of work for this year, and I'm able to relax because I'm not feeling needed or wanted. And I think that's the double-edged sword of doing what we do is you get to hear regularly how you're helping people, how you're needed, how you're necessary, and all that. But much of what we do is the long game, right? So it can feel like a desert of is what I'm doing worth it at all? But then when you walk up or hear that beautiful vista of all the benefits that you're helping people with, it's worth it. So a lighter question is, it's the holiday season. I'd love to hear from each of you what your favorite holiday movie is.
Die Hard.
I did watch Die Hard the other day, right? Honestly, when that picture of Nakatomi Plaza comes in, it's like, this is Christmas.
It's perfect.
No, what's my favorite Christmas film? Right, I have two. I have the one I'll tell everyone is the right answer, and the one I truly believe is the right answer.
And they're both Die Hard.
Die Hard
Be your
1's the only
authentic
correct
self,
answer, right?
Ryan. Be your authentic self.
So I genuinely enjoy a film called Daddy's Home 2. Mark Wahlberg and John Cena's in it, and Will Ferrell. It's just amazing. It's really good. I love that too. I love Bad Mums as well because that's a great one. But there was a Netflix one that came out like 10 years ago called The Christmas Chronicles. It's a kids one. It's Goldie Hawn, Kurt Russell. It's a very modern Christmas one, but my kids love it, and it's just so Christmassy. It's amazing. So yeah.
What's Christmassy? Yeah, I know what the word means, but what does Christmassy
What's Christmassy
mean to you?
It's that kind of warm feeling, like Jim said, of not being wanted or needed, which sounds awful, but from a business perspective, I really need that. I need to know that no one is going to be waiting for me to respond. But also, it's just that ability to sit there and just click brains off. And I never get that. But for 2.5 weeks over Christmas, I can say I am not thinking about agility and Scrum. And it is the best feeling. What about you?
Well, obviously, Die Hard is going to be my favorite Christmas movie of all time. And I don't care who's going to try and prove me wrong. Marge, I see you in here. Die Hard is my favorite Christmas movie. And it will forever be so.
Okay.
Awesome.
Now the honest answer?
Die Hard.
Okay.
No, it's one of those things that just got ingrained and it will be there forever.
And what about you, Jim?
Wow, why is it Die Hard?
I was thinking Die Hard is a Christmas movie. You're not going to have to convince me on this, like that whole pineapple fiasco. I think for me, it's going to be National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. And I saw it just last night, and why I asked this question is I saw a headline on one of the social media platforms that it doesn't hold up, and I totally disagree. I don't laugh any less today watching, Chevy Chase and Randy Quaid empty the shitter than I did 20 years ago. So I mean, for me, that's my answer. My second answer is Love Actually. And
okay.
I mean, I just love that movie for a lot of different reasons. I love London and all that. So yeah, those would be my two answers.
You're an American.
Well, I describe London as it's a lot like New York, but it smells better and there's a lot less garbage and the people are nicer.
I would say London is like New York from Wish.com.
London is tolerable for short periods of time.
Isn't it funny how when you're local, because I assume you're saying that because you know it at a much deeper and more regular level than I do. But why do you feel like that? Like, tell us. Sorry, I interrupted, but why is it?
No. So firstly, I live about 2 hours outside of London, so I very rarely need to go in. But when I do, I think it's because I associate London so heavily with work, because that's really the reason I go there. And so it's always a very early morning, a packed tube train at 7, 8 a.m. Getting back at 5, 6, and to the train station, home by 9. Just super long days, and it's just so busy. People are rude. They don't smile at you and say hello. And yeah, it just doesn't. It's not great. But there's a lot to do. So
Knife crime.
Lower than you might think, but still not low enough.
I had a realization. I don't know if it's true, but it was interesting. Is why do people love the whole scrolling social media aspect of things? And as someone who grew up in the middle of a massive country where when it was dark, it was really dark, it could be overwhelmingly lonely. Like to be sitting, I remember being, a teenager and just being sitting there outside on the porch. It's midnight and you could pretty easily believe like bad things could happen to me and no one would know, or I am so inconsequential. And I think the allure that social media gives us and the allure that a big city like London or New York gives you is there's always something to do. And I wonder if that's healthy because, if you mentioned going for long walks and taking space to kind of be with your thoughts and organize them and all that, I wonder, and I'm not a psychologist, if that's the itch that social media scratches for people is this feeling of no matter what's going on in your life, you're not alone. There's other stuff going on. Other people have it worse than you, etc. Do you think that could be something, or do I need to go schedule another appointment with my therapist?
But yes to both.
Yes.
And I think this is what a lot of organizations themselves struggle with as well. That there's always something to do. There's always something going on. So I don't have to focus on the stuff that I have to focus on because there's something else that's going on. And then you lose the thing that's most valuable. Like, what is most valuable? And you don't have to think about that because there's something else that we can do. And that's where the doom scrolling starts to go, right?
Yeah.
And there's the whole psychological aspect of always focusing on something else. So organizations and people don't have to have a good critical look at themselves because something else is always more important. There's bigger fish to fry. Well, fuck those fish.
That's going to be the soundbite for the podcast.
It's not going to be the first one.
For me, I think that kind of doom scrolling, I think people seek connection. They want this kind of one way. They're just looking for the next bit that makes them laugh or gives them some level of, hey, I'm like you. And that's kind of, I think, again, why we wrote the book. There was just that option to say we are similar. We do have connection. But equally, I think there is a big problem with social media that we feel this need to constantly be connected. It is okay to just be you, right? Love yourself. And if you're going to just take those long walks. So do you know what river dance is? Yes, right. So I am a massive fan of river dance, right? It's a very peculiar thing. Michael
cool.
Flatley, old school, right? I love river dance. But whenever I go on my long walks, if I need to think, I just put on the music, right? With a bit of tap in, that kind of stuff. And do you guys have those songs that just remind you of certain places?
Yes.
When you were playing like old school games when you were a teenager in your room and it just makes you feel good. Well, that's just what Riverdance does for me. And having those kind of hooks, those psychological hooks that help you take your mind off stuff, I think we need more of that than we do connection, right? We talk about the mental health bucket in the book.
Yes.
We're so focused about the water, the work, the stuff flowing in the top that we forget to focus on how do we allow more water out the bottom. So we need to figure out how we're going to be able to drill more holes in our bucket to make us feel better about ourselves. So I think you're onto something completely, Jim.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think the songs for sure take me back. Smells have taken me back to a place. And I would assume or bet that if we could put a dollar amount, a market cap on the idea of nostalgia, it would be trillions of dollars. Like if you look at every modern franchise that's being rebooted and you're seeing second iterations of things that I grew up watching, or these long book series, or ubiquitous things, I think it's playing on nostalgia. And what I find is I can read a book, I can listen to something, I can watch something that can take me right back to a place, sometimes so powerfully that I would swear I can smell something that happened 30 years ago. And I think that some of those things, or most of those things that it takes us back to, are probably at the extreme ends of the spectrum, either really good times or really bad times, or safe times, maybe, where we felt at peace or comfortable or whatever. And I just think, as a consumer, am I giving in to nostalgia, right? Like, am I watching this movie? Am I buying this thing and ignoring the bigger problem? But there's nothing wrong with putting a little bit of salve on a wound, right? Like, that's not a bad thing. It's when it becomes a replacement for actually dealing with whatever it is. And where I'm going with this is, I think, as a product owner, or anybody who's trying to build, create, improve, optimize something, the scariest phrase is, just tell me what to do. That, to me, is so high on the apathy scale. And I think product owners can fall into this thing of, you know what? It's hard to critically think today. Just tell me what to do. And I'm curious, you all have thought about this much deeper and longer than I have, but what do you think of that concept? Are there pragmatic tools that you offer in the book if someone's feeling like that right now?
Pragmatic tools is a good question. Let's go back to the whole nostalgia thing, because I think nostalgia in and by itself is outlived pretty quickly. You see that with Kodak, who tried to revive the Polaroid camera a couple of years ago. Like, it have a very short lifespan. I think there's a very fine balance between trying to revive nostalgia and continuously living in the past. And that's what a lot of organizations do, right? We've always done business like this, so why should we change? So they keep living in whatever they've always done. They keep living in the 1950s with their management style, for instance, or the way that they produce their product, whatever. They forget to inspect and adapt. The problem with nostalgia in that sense is it is outdated per default. Right. So the organizations don't think about the future anymore. They don't think, how should we innovate? How can we stay relevant? How should we try to persist and have a profitable business, a profitable product? They're just focusing on the delivery aspect and not about the discovery nor the validation. We're just coming back to the question on just tell me what to do. We just become corporate zombies, and we're pretty much fine with that in many organizations, in many instances. And I think that that's the scary part, because someone can ask you, tell me what to do, from a mentoring perspective as well. So it's the reasoning behind it. Why does someone ask me this? Does he genuinely at this point just struggle how to put this to practice, or would like to have some tools because it's just a shit day? Or has this person indeed become apathetic to the job, and they're like, yeah, fuck it, just tell me what to do, I'll do it, and then 9 or 5 o'clock and I'll punch out.
I think sometimes that apathy does result in that kind of, we're calling it apathy almost without context, though. Sometimes apathy comes from, I'm so bored of this, I have no interest, I'm checked out. But also that kind of, please tell me what to do, is a lack of trust. It's being scared. I could absolutely love my product, but I'm worried, due to the way I've been treated in the past, to make a mistake. I could be 100% bought in, but still be asking that question. So I think what we want to try and do is stop assuming that certain statements mean certain things, right? We've got to try and find the root cause. One of the biggest things I hate in a lot of organizations is, hey, let's have a lessons learned over the entire project of 2 years. We're going to write the lessons learned. We're going to stick them in Confluence, the place where knowledge goes to die. And yet when it comes around again, the same problem 2 years later, it's funny how we forget all those lessons we learned and we do the same things again, right? I've been on a product for 3.5 years. When I joined, there were 4 separate teams. When I joined, they decided to scale, right? And when I say scale, not
going into this yet.
One large team, so there were almost 30 people. And then a year later, they realized, hey, that was a bad idea. Let's split them again. And just a few weeks ago, we said, do you know what would be a really good idea? Let's bring them back together again. Do you remember that we've been through this cycle multiple times, learned the reasons why it was a bad idea? People have insanely short memory spans. So nostalgia, you're right. I sometimes I almost wish that, you know, we see like flares and hairstyles and shoes and that kind of stuff come back over periods of time. I wish common sense was just here to stay. And unfortunately, it just seems to be disappearing at a rate of knots.
Yeah, well, shout out to my friend Summer. She likes to say that common sense is not a flower that grows in everyone's garden. And something Sandra and I talked about on a recent episode that I hope we're going to have another guest on to talk about is this skill of critical thinking. And I happen to have a friend and former colleague who's in the business of teaching students, you know, under the university level to think critically. And I'm curious, how do you learn to think critically? Or if someone is in that cycle of just tell me what to do, how would you influence them, let's say, instead of convince, but how would you influence them to start to think more critically about something?
I think the easiest question is always and forever keep asking why. I think that's the starting point of this whole thing. Also, just to fill the other side of apathy, the opposite of apathy to me is like corporate complacency, where everyone becomes so arrogant, like we know what to do, and they forget to actually inspect and adapt their surroundings. Does that make sense? I think that's something that you want to avoid as well. So just reflecting at times, like, where on this scale am I right now, and am I still loving the things that I'm doing right now? Does it give me more energy than it drains me? I think those are some of these questions that feed the whole curiosity, the prevention of apathy, making sure that they're still in there, and also common sense. Like, why are we doing this? Does it align with our goals? Does it align with my personal values? Does this help the company forward or the product? And if not, why are we doing this? Like, these are very easy questions. They're rarely being asked because we become corporate zombies and become these feature factories that we so desire not to become.
Yeah, I think critical thinking as well is weirdly a very cultural thing. So I speak about it a lot, right? We do work in Japan, and it's not to say that they are less critical thinkers. My God, they're insanely clever people. But it's the same in India and wider Asian cultures, that actually that need to critically challenge is almost seen as being disrespectful. Whereas actually I see it in a lot of more westernized society, and it's certainly not to say that it's widespread, but when you have a culture of trust and where challenge is not viewed negatively, I think you start to build that level of critical thinking because you see other people model it. So in the UK, we have an A-level, I don't know what you call them in the Netherlands, but when you're 16 to 18, you can take a subject called critical thinking. And there is an assessment on it, and effectively you take a look through multiple sources and you come to your own opinion about something. And I think even though that's again transactional way of doing something, you need to be exposed to good modeling. You need to be put in scenarios that push you, where and politics in the world right now is a great example of that. There is no right answer. There is only an opinion, and you need to be willing to go out, learn, to form that opinion. And I'm not necessarily saying defend it, but part of critical thinking is hearing the opposing view and not going into something assuming that you are right. You need to have that growth mindset. That's the only way you can be a critical thinker, to be willing to be wrong.
Exactly. And then you come back to the corporate complacency kind of thing, where we need to keep balancing diversity in cultural backgrounds, ideas, perspectives, and so on to actually progress. And I think that's undervalued.
Yep.
Well, and a phrase that
check the comments as well, by the way. There I see there are some comments, but I'm not able to click them right now. Or Edward can. Thank you, Edward.
No. We'll let Edward do it. There's this phrase that is it's two to argue and three to disagree. And I think that third person is critical because they can act as a mediator, a pivot point from two diverging opinions. How do you guard against always asking why, and just showing up to a meeting, showing up to work, and your colleagues being super annoyed that you're always challenging the status quo. You're always asking why. Any tips around that?
So something we spoke about in the car earlier, on the way back from picking up a load of booze really early in the morning.
Perfect morning.
It was a very good morning, actually. Now you've lost my train of thought. That kind of... Some people call it asking stupid questions. I don't think that gives our career and what we're trying to do there justice. But actually, a lot of us work with software, but it doesn't matter what product it is. You as a developer are a specialist in building that thing. I don't challenge you on how you build it. Equally, my expertise and the reason I'm here is because I hate using the word expert, but arguably my skill set is in organizational change, in team level dynamics, and that kind of stuff. So maybe believe me when I say I've seen this a few times and I know how you might want to improve. Because we deal with very soft skills that are not very tangible, not very measurable. When I interview people for Scrum Master, Agile, product people positions, I'm thinking, are they willing to deal with evidence-based management, and are they a dick? Right? And actually, I can work with pretty much anyone who uses evidence to make decisions and who is not a dick. So for me, asking why, it's the team understanding that you do know what you're talking about, and hopefully you're not just going like, why, like a 5-year-old. You are asking with an intent because you are waiting for an answer to latch onto. If you're doing it to make a point, then yeah, maybe you should be shown the door.
Yeah, but I think there's also multiple shades of why, right? It's the way that you form the question. You don't always have to literally ask why, but it could be something as simple as like, to what goal does this connect? What if we don't do this? What proof do we have that this is going to be valuable? You can put why in front of all these sentences, but it's the way that you frame it. And if indeed you're just continuing asking why just for the sake of asking why, then yeah, you're going to be super annoying and people are going to be bored with you. So think about the way that you frame it, but also who's your intended audience. And that's something that we talk in Solving for Value a lot as well. Like, channel your information to the audience you have. It's the same with roadmaps, right? There's no one roadmap to rule them all. Think about what's the audience, what do they need to get out of this. Let's take a very pragmatic scenario that we've all been in before. A stakeholder comes up to you and you're like, why the fuck should we do this? Of course, that's another shade of asking why. That could also be like, what if we don't do this? What's the investment required? Let's break this down with developers. Let's try to align this with goals. Sudden, when the big picture gets clear, they can draw the conclusion of this is not necessarily very valuable because it's going to be like triple the investment that I want to pay for it, so I'm going to retract it. So it's the way that you frame this why question as well.
And usually when I'm asking why, it's probably because I'm trying to guide people towards a certain answer, right? It's coaching in some ways. We've all been in those situations where people are having an argument and it's like, I'm fairly certain I know the answer here, right? But I'm not going to tell you. I need you to realize it yourselves, because frankly, people think you're stupid. If you just said, I know the answer, me, they'd say no. But if you can guide them there over 2 or 3 questions, eventually they might go, huh. And naturally, when you've come up with your own solution, you've critically thought about it, you are more likely to buy into the answer than if someone had just told you, right? Exactly. That's why coaching is an amazing skill. And frankly, I am awful at it. I just want to jump in and give people the answer.
But is that because you're a teacher background?
No, I don't think so. I just think I am so impatient when people are like, just get there, please, just get there quickly. We're trying to I want to apply my experience, and sometimes I wish people have the same experience as me. The truthful answer is I don't wish that, because then there'd be no diversity. But I wish people, like, when you're just having the same old argument, right? I'm working with a team now who has a daily scrum, but they only have it every other day.
So it's like, by default, not a daily scrum.
Can you not see why? Please take the PSM3 and learn. Like, I'm being sarcastic and facetious here, but I just wish people, how could they not learn that? But they need to realize it, right? Like, a kid needs to learn that you don't eat mud. You got to taste it once and realize not to. Not allowing them to run into the road, but allowing them to eat mud. I'm constantly trying to find the line between that.
Which is disgusting.
Right. Yep.
I think we should slowly start wrapping up.
Okay.
I know there's a small delay, Jim.
Sure.
We can edit that out.
Well, as we start to wrap it up, I'm curious. We've talked a lot about writing. What are you all reading right now? I know you're both avid readers. Anything to share?
So I'm not an avid reader.
Oh, well, egg on my face.
So, to clarify that, so I think corporate books, I read them very rarely. So things like, what was the last thing I read? Like Atomic Habits, I read that. I thought that could have been summarized into a few blogs. Turns out it was a few blogs at the start that he turned into a book. I like Blinkist a lot, right? Which summarizes books into short things. I read The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. That was really good. But I just think that corporate books, are overdone. And that's the reason why we wrote this book differently, because we wrote something that we would want to read. But I'm a fiction reader. My wife is an English teacher, so she's constantly guiding me towards good fiction series, sometimes science fiction, sometimes romantasy, whatever they call it now. I think that's what it's called.
Fabio?
Yeah,
like
so I'm
Fabio,
reading
big bare-chested man on the cover, right? Is that what romantasy is?
I mean, no, but I guess sometimes there's an element of that. No, I like kind of like vampire-y stuff, right? Stuff that I can totally just go, this is not real. And I like the ability to just lose myself in a book. I think the best times are when you're sat on a beach somewhere, no kids. Sadly, we can't experience that for a fair few years. But to just constantly, strawberry daiquiri in one hand, book in another, pasty white guy on the chair, I'm living my best life.
All the stuff that's never going to be true, like vampires and 50 Shades of Grey and all that kind of work. For me, I'm rereading Continuous Discovery Habits by Teresa Torres, because now we're working on the next book, but also on some discovery card games and some other. Let's stick to me exciting developments that are, I think they're going to be promising. They could be very useful to students and to practitioners, and these ideas start to click in my brain until they form a really big picture. And there's a lot of content in Continuous Discovery Habits that helped me form these connections. So I'm just rereading it to see what I can relearn from this. What about you, Jim?
Well, like Ryan, I read a lot of fiction books. So I'm reading the new Mitch Rapp novel. And from a business books perspective, I just finished Persuasion. And I need to go back and read it again. I think this is going to be one of those books that is kind of rare for me, where I'm going to read it once a year. Just to make those ideas and tips and practical things really set deeply in me. I am a big believer of this idea of Cialdini and persuasion and all that.
Who's the writer of Persuasion for those who want to buy it?
Robert Cialdini, the godfather of influence.
Oh, never heard of him before. That's something new for me.
Hey, I'm always open to new books.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, let's start wrapping up. Take us home, Jim.
Awesome. Well, thank you, gentlemen, so much for this. I am sure that there's going to be a lot of stocking stuffed with your book this holiday season. I know you're going to have a very busy day, a very big ego-stroking day, so don't let it go to your heads. But I am so proud of both of you. I know it's a Herculean undertaking to do this. You are over the finish line, and you are now about to be drinking the milk and champagne. And it's very, very well deserved. So I'm just happy to be a tiny little part of the journey. And listeners, please go give Solving for Value a look this holiday season.
All right. Thank you again for discussing this with us, because it indeed has been an effort. And also, thank you, Ryan, for keeping up with me, keep putting up with me for these 2.5 years. And on to the next one.
I swear I'd never do it again, and he's already persuaded me to do it again. So maybe he has actually read Persuasion already, and he's just not telling me.
Maybe he has.
Dun, dun, dun.
But yes, thank you, Jim, for interviewing us, for having a chat, and it's always good to see you, man.
You too. Cheers.
All right. You too. Cheers. Bye, everyone.